Welcome. This is the Mindful Equestrian Interview Series where I talk to amateurs and professionals about their background in riding and the horse business and get their feedback as to their histories and stories. And today I am talking to Karin Krchnak, and I'm excited to introduce her because she's an inspiring woman who began her career riding journey as an adult. Karin is highly successful professional who balances a busy career, including frequent travel, with her passion for horses. She's an excellent example of someone who's embraced riding later in life, and I'm looking forward to hearing her stories, insights, and how she manages it all. Welcome, Karin.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to have you here. Thank you for being part of this. So, first thing I want to ask is, tell me a little bit about how you got into horses later in life and what led you to wanting to ride.
So yeah, I started, I guess I was 51 when I started. I did not ride, like when I was a kid, there were some, trail rides that I did, right? So it's not that I've never rode, but it was like trail rides here and there, right? I never had lessons, and it just wasn't something. We were immigrant family from what was Czechoslovakia. I was born in what is the Slovak part. And, when we came to the US, I was young, but my parents didn't speak English. And so, horseback riding was kind of just not in the cards. And, then I started my career. I was pretty much in my career, which has been now several decades, working all over the world, Asia, Africa, Latin America, Europe, and it left really very little time for much else. And then I had a daughter, so of course that, I wanted to focus in on her, but I was still doing all the traveling. But I put her into riding lessons when she was 3, because I am someone who absolutely loves animals. I feel a deep connection with animals, and I think horses have made so much of who we are. I mean, and I don't think they get the full credit for it, right? Like our just civilization of where we are.
Yes.
And so I put her in for riding, but again, I was still traveling all the time, rarely home. And actually I was in Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia because I was there for meetings. I had a work program there, I had a team there, and I went there a number of times, but the last time I went there, and this was actually it was 2019, and there was a little bookstore in the airport, and I bought this book called On the Trail of Genghis Khan, who is about this guy who gets a horse and basically follows the trail of Genghis Khan. Yeah, amazing. And I read the book, and I remember putting it down saying, you know what, I'm going to just start taking horseback riding lessons, and I'll just have to make it work with my life schedule. And that was fall of 2019. So I started taking a lesson once a week. And then, of course, COVID hit in early March 2020, and we went into lockdown. I was able to find a barn in Virginia, where I was able to kind of take a lesson here and there, even during, the kind of those period of COVID lockdown. But it was still an interruption, right, in terms of kind of riding. But then things opened up, and, I started riding. And so, I guess I look back now, I guess it's 5 years, but, with the bit of, the COVID kind of period of time there. And it was being in that bookstore and picking up that book and saying, you know what, I'm just going to make it work for my schedule. And I'm so glad I did. I obviously have those kind of pining of like, oh, I wish I started younger because I'd be a better rider. But, I'm so happy that, I have to just let that go, honestly.
Yeah, and actually that's a wonderful thing you brought up, because I think that's a very common theme for riders who start riding as adults, or maybe get back to it as adults, or whatever they, if wishes were horses, so to speak,
Right.
woulda, shoulda, coulda,
Right.
and it does kind of can slow down the progress when you get stuck in that mindset. So, good for you for getting past that.
Yeah. Well, it's a work in progress.
Yep.
I will say there are times when I think about like my position, because one of the things that I'm working on is that independent seat, right? And, it's when I ride, sometimes it's kind of like, oh, I've got a, mortgage, I've got a child, I've got a lot of responsibilities, I've got a staff. Like, there's a lot of things I worry about. And then that translates into my body. And then, of course, the poor horse feels me like just kind of stiffen up, right? Instead of just kind of being relaxed. But like all those things are churning in my mind, which, I'm not to say that, 8 or 10 or 12-year-olds don't have a lot of things on their mind, but let's be
Yeah,
honest, it's really different. Right?
it's really different. Yes, yes. Actually, when I do clinics, Karen, I ask questions like, what's your mindset issue? Uh, Little kids and teenagers like, nah, nothing. And they might actually have something, but they have no, like,
Yeah.
they are thinking about it or aware of it. They may
Right.
be
Yeah.
overthink or whatever. And then the adults, it's like boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
They can tell me all sorts of stuff. Being that is much is one of the big ones. It's just bringing everything from life
Yeah.
to riding.
Right. Yeah. No, I remember once taking a lesson and I had a really, well, I say important. I guess every meeting is always important, but I remember being on the horse in a lesson and all I could think in my head was just, I need to get to this meeting in New York. I can't have anything happen. I got to get to this meeting in New York. Right. And like, probably I didn't get the most out of the lesson if I just relaxed and said, you know what, New York will be there. I'll get to the meeting. But of course, that was running through my head because, again, you have those responsibilities.
Yeah. Well, and then sometimes I will mention too to clients, well, if it's that big of a thing, then maybe that's not the day you ride or take a lesson.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's true. That's true. And I don't think I take that always into account, but I think that's a really important thing for people to think
Particularly
about.
if
Yeah,
you're taking a lesson. One thing is like, oh, I'm just going to go ride around and relax and
right.
not try to accomplish anything. But if you're like trying to get something out of a lesson and it's beyond something big like that
Right.
maybe
Yes.
sometimes then it's
Yeah.
better just to give yourself permission to, okay, I won't ride today. I'll reschedule it. You
Yeah,
know,
that's true. That is
you
really
know.
true. That's very true.
So,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
is, it is, and it's, and I know I didn't mention, but you and I have worked together coaching wise, and that's some of the stuff we worked on, right?
Yeah,
That mindful
absolutely.
being present and
Yeah, the
and
whole
and
present state of mind is something you and I've worked on, and it's something, to be honest, that I pretty much never really gave much thought to before we started working together. I mean, I was definitely on always, on this hamster wheel of life of like, meetings, work, projects, deliverables, travel. It was constant travel to the next place and doing there and always looking forward or looking back, but not really just breathing into the present. And that's where working with you really has changed that for me. I'm not saying I still kind of get into the forward looking or past looking, but I definitely feel a lot of times after you and I work together too, like, I have a long commute to work, which gets me frustrated. But after we work together, a lot of times I'll be driving and I'll like kind of look at the trees and be like, oh, they're beautiful. Or, just focus on what's going on or around rather than like, oh, I gotta get, to
trying
the
to change
office
something
and
and
frustrated. Yeah.
yeah, that you have no
Yeah.
control over anyway. Yeah,
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 exactly. Yes, it's true. Yeah,
it
none.
is. But then too, it is a work. It's a mindfulness is called a practice, so we never get perfect at it. We're always working at it,
Right.
and John, I think I've shared this with you. John Kabat-Zinn's quote, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. We just get better at getting, like you said, when you're in the car and you notice, oh, there I go again, to bring
Right.
yourself back to
Yeah,
become
it's
present.
true. Yeah.
Or when you're on the horse, you feel yourself going down that path. It's like, oh, I know now to bring myself back. I can anchor to my breath or
Right.
whatever I may use to kind
Right.
of
Yeah. No, and I
get
remember after you and I worked together too, like, even when I get to the barn, when I'm grooming the horse of like just focusing on breathing and like that time there. Cause I actually love grooming and tacking up a horse. I love that part of the time. And, one thing I did change after also since you and I started working together was as soon as I get onto enter the property of the barn, I do not check my phone.
good for you.
And I used to, and then I remember many times when I'd be grooming and tacking, and I'm like, I get called, I'd make a phone call or sending text or something like that. And it's like that doesn't help the horse or me, honestly. But that was a big change of like, if somebody needs me, they obviously can call me urgently, right? But, if I'm currying, a horse, like, let me just focus on that, right?
Well, and everybody will contact you thinking what they need is urgent, right?
Yes, yes,
And
that's
yeah,
true.
and and like you mentioned, how much you enjoy that, to that, not just to let rush through that, but to enjoy that. And some days maybe you don't get much more time than to maybe groom a horse, and that's good too.
Right. Yeah, no, it's true. That's very true. Yeah, yeah,
I know
yeah. Well,
you
one
work.
day I would love to have a horse, which I've thought about, like, I even the grazing part, right? Like just spending time grazing, like a lot. If I ride, sometimes just take the horse out and then I take a brush and brush the horse down while he's grazing, or she, and just enjoying that time, right?
Yep. Well, I know you
Yeah.
work with the draft horse rescue as well, right? And
I do, yeah. So on Sundays, I volunteer at a draft horse rescue. And it's called Gentle Giants Draft Horse Rescue, and I tell you, the drafts truly, it's the right name, Gentle Giants, because they
yep.
really are just absolutely gentle giants, and that's true too. Even there, like, I don't check the phone, right? We're there. We obviously have, we have to help feed the horses, help grooming, clean, muck the stables and so forth. So, there's a lot to do. And, obviously the horses all have needs too, because they come from difficult situations. But even every moment of that is just absolutely wonderful. And again, they're trying to focus in on the present rather of like, where I need to rush to afterwards.
Yeah, because everything you mentioned, everything from cleaning stalls to feeding them to grooming them, can be mindfully done, right?
Yeah,
It can
that's
be
true. Yeah.
a very
Yeah.
meditative kind of event. That's really cool.
Yeah. And it's also nice to always be moving like that, because for somebody, especially, those of us who with careers where you sit in an office, it's being in that move, like I love mucking stalls because it's like
Right.
moving every single part of my body, right? And
Being physical. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and interesting too, and you brought it up earlier, and again now, the idea of, I think many of the people I work with, particularly women, have been are professionals who've lived a very busy life and then get into riding or get back to riding,
right,
one or the other. And it's finding it's the bringing that, like you said, that professional mindset, you know, to everything you do, and learning to, it's okay not to have, it's okay to get away from that.
right. Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and I find too, for someone who is in a professional career, and maybe my type of personality is I tend to overthink things.
Yep.
And I know this is something that you and I've worked on as well. And I've also worked with trainers, in my lessons of, don't be always overthinking. Just, feel the horse, enjoy the ride. And that's something I'm really still working on, is just really understanding, feeling the biomechanics of the horse and like my own body and how we're working together, right? Rather than, overthinking every single, like my leg has to be in the exact perfect position. Like,
Yep.
you don't want it in the wrong, obviously, where it's a safety issue, but like it doesn't have, there's not a perfect position, right?
Right. And again, getting out of your head and connecting to the horse and feeling the
Right.
horse. And I actually do things now, every time I teach, I find things that work better and better, and really work on now telling people what, instead of saying your leg needs to go there, go find the place where your leg needs to be to get the job done, whatever you
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
do.
That's
And all of a
true.
sudden the leg goes to where it needs to be, and I'll be like, feel your leg there, feel it working,
Right. Right.
and then that
Yeah.
also people get out of their, you have to be out of your head to
Yes.
connect to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean,
But as
and
a professional in a career, at least for me, like we overthink because there's a lot of things we're responsible for, projects or work, and like we have to be thinking on everything possible, um, rather than like just through our bodies, right? We're always using our minds, at least for me in my job, in
right,
my career, is like you're always using your mind. Like I've not had a job that's a physical, and this is there is the mental and emotional aspect to writing, but really the physical.
right, right. And I think too, it's interesting. The people I work with who have very like highly stressful jobs where the minutia is very important, like an
Yes.
accountant in banking
Yeah.
or what you're
Right.
doing, things like
Yeah.
that. you can't make those mistakes. You do make mistakes, and it's actually not bad to learn that it's okay,
Right.
even in your work, to kind of have that feel for things as opposed to being so caught up in all the little things. But it's also part of the job that's put upon you or expected of you to have every little box checked off,
Right. Yes. Yeah. Right.
you know.
Right. Yeah.
So
Well,
you
and here
do.
you have a living being that's you're underneath you, right? And like they have their own, like each horse is different, right? As
Yep.
I haven't been riding that many years, but I'm starting to feel the differences in the horses, in their gaits and just their body structures. And sometimes they're just mental attitudes, right? Like,
Right. Right.
sometimes they're like, you know what, I don't really feel like working today, right?
Yeah.
And then they can sense with me that I'm a bit of a marshmallow, and it's like, oh, okay, well,
Yeah. Yeah. And and I use the comment too of like, don't think about what you need from the horse, but what does the horse need from you?
right.
And
Yeah.
maybe it is being more assertive that day, or maybe it is supporting them on their left side, or
Yeah.
whatever it may be,
Right.
but
Right.
shifting that into that mindset.
Yeah.
So what I do want to talk about too is how you have brought all your horse experience and combine that with your travel interests and everything. I mean, because I know you travel so much for work, but you also love traveling, from if from what talking to you. So
Yeah.
tell me some stories around that.
I don't travel as much as I used to for work. I mean, it used to be like 60% or more that on a
Hmm.
year on an, annual basis. So it was really long haul trips every month. Luckily, I don't do that amount of travel, but last few weeks I was, in Houston twice, right? So I do travel still some, and then I also travel for, just family vacations, with my daughter and husband and my mother. And we're from Europe too, right? So to go visit family and so forth. One thing that I've done is I've started to, and it was really this year, is to explore some vacations that include riding,
Hmm.
which was new to me. And I have to say, so I did in South Africa in April. That was 3 days. And then I went to Mongolia in August for 11 days of riding. And it was, both of them were just fabulous. Like it's funny because in Mongolia, the woman who runs the program, and it's such a great program because she actually uses it to, people go on these riding expeditions, but you also raise money for kids, for schools to have supplies and to be able to have, access to a warm school. It's like, young kids, 3, 4, 5 year olds who wouldn't have that opportunity otherwise. So it's the Value Foundation, and use part of the riding is also raising money. So you're riding, but you're also doing a great thing for kids otherwise who wouldn't have these opportunities. But this when we were riding in August, she said to me, she's like, the 11 days we were riding, I probably got like a year's worth of lessons, like because you're doing so much riding, right? And then I was like, wow, it's true. If you even add up the time, like the amount of time we were riding, like one day I rode 25 miles. Like,
Yeah.
where else do I get a chance to ride 25 miles in a day?
Well, and I would think too, there's not just like lessons, but it's like you're out there having to figure it out
Oh, yes. Yeah.
without it being
Yes.
told to you, which is kind of good, because
Yeah.
you get caught in lessons and think, okay, I got to wait for somebody to tell me what to do next. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I have
Yeah,
to figure
no,
this
it's true.
out.
I have to say the thing for me, especially being an adult rider who started as an adult, these trips I think really help boost my confidence,
Yep.
right? Because in a lesson, no matter the trainers are great, I've worked with great trainers, but the confidence in a ring as you're riding in a ring is, and like I said, you're thinking about work or all these other things, but out there in the open, you're out in the open and you're there, and obviously they support and make sure everything's safe. But you're still you're there riding for hours and as you said, figuring things out, and also letting go a little bit because you're just riding. You're right. You're not in a lesson like where you're getting instruction every step of the way. You're just out there riding. And I remember when I was riding in Mongolia, I was riding actually one of Julie's horses, and he's a really forward mover. And we got into a canter, and I will say, I'm still kind of early days on the canter comfort level. But he had a great canter, and like, you have to kind of look down because you're open terrain, you're on the Mongolian steppe. And I looked over and there was a drop off. And so I just veered him off to the left. And then we went cantering up this hill. And like, I can't tell you what that did for my confidence that I was able to just do that. Right. I mean,
And
and,
it just
probably if
happens
you
in,
looked at us, maybe my technique was not like perfect, but, we did it and I had a great time.
well, and it just happens in real time, right? You're not thinking about,
Yes.
oh, I'm going to have to go jump that jump or do that. You're just like,
Right.
oh, here we go.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the other thing, and I know we talked about this a little well, before you went, and like I remember when you signed up for it. Um, but the idea that, you know, they're real horsemen, but they're doing it in a different way. They're not looking at every little detail technique to try to win at a horse show. The
Right.
horses are serve a purpose for them,
Right. Yes. Yeah.
right?
Right. That's true. Yes.
You
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
in the general Mongolian
Right.
life, like that, it's a form of travel, you
Yes.
know,
It's part
and
of their, yes,
it's part of their
exactly.
life.
It's
So
part
they're
of their lives.
riding,
Yes.
they're very good, but it's a totally different thing. And they're not looking at all the work
No.
the leg exactly in this place or do that.
Well, and they shift their position constantly. Actually, one of the other riders who was with me, who's been on several of these expeditions in Mongolia, she said, watch them. They're constantly shifting their position. And it was interesting to watch that because they're constantly shifting their position. So it's not like this kind of you're locked in one position that's the perfect position. It's like you're moving and you move with the horse. And sometimes, a lot of times they're standing up, right, too. And it's like, okay, well, do that, right? And go with it.
Yeah, and it's for the circumstances of what they need to do, right?
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Exactly.
so,
Yeah.
you know, and our riding has become, like you said, you know, early on about how the horses have had such a impact on the development through history, but our riding has become more of a, you know, pleasure thing
Right.
and performance thing than the horses being, you know, like part
Part of the lot. Yeah.
of the
Right.
life, service that's needed or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Absolutely. I have to say, I do say I miss actually because, we were staying in Gers and there in Mongolia, and, the horses would be around the Ger at night, and just hearing the horses and they're kind of munching and they're snorting and just like, they're just part of life around. I mean, it's just, it was incredible. I have to say, it was absolutely incredible.
yeah, and you know, and you did a great job. I mean, you really had a great time and did all the stuff that you know you expected to do, right? So
Yeah, I did. I really had, I will say it pushed my boundaries,
that's
but
good.
in a good way, right? In a good way.
How did so you talk about it pushing your boundaries? Did it change anything in you aside from horses when you did pushing those boundaries?
Um, I I guess the one thing is, I would say, aside from kind of being with horses, is just in general, like the connection to nature in general. Like
That's good.
Mongolians are
Yeah.
so connected to nature, and that I feel like I'm bringing and integrating that more into my life, like just trying to be more integrated with nature and kind of earth, and kind of apply that to my life in general. And also, Mongolian people are just so wonderful. I mean, they're so kind and just gentle, and you know, not judgmental, at least from my experience,
Right.
right? And, and I have to say that's something for me too that I'm trying to integrate also better, because I just feel like, well, at least for me, it's like, we're always in a rush, we're always kind of judging, you
Having
know,
opinions about things.
having
Yep.
opinions about
Yep.
everything. And it's like, you know what? You don't need to do that always,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, I think, you know, I'm sure they have, well, just, you know, we've gotten, particularly since social media and the internet and all that, I think it's even gotten worse to
Right.
bring in that judginess. So they're
Yeah, yeah, the
not
judginess.
into all
Yes.
that. And
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I am trying to eliminate that. I will say I am trying to eliminate that, including on my own riding, right? Like, because even before I know I would, and you and I've worked on this too, of like comparing myself to
yep.
others. And that kind of judginess, I'm definitely trying to let go, because it doesn't serve me in any way, honestly. That's what I've come to the conclusion when I was in Mongolia. It just doesn't serve me.
I love that you asked that. You say that because I do it now, but I remember even at the college when I taught, I'd say, how does that serve you?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
no,
that mind, how
exactly.
does that serve
That's what
you?
it dawned on me. I was like, it
Instead of
doesn't.
saying, that's not working because actually, how does it serve you? And it's like, well, you know what?
Yeah.
Not so good. Then,
No,
yeah,
no, it doesn't. I mean, it really in many ways detracts from me enjoying the riding. And this is what I'm coming to realize is like, boy, I'm really lucky to be able to ride horses. Not everybody can do that. I
exactly.
understand they may not be physically or financially. I mean, there's a lot of, especially here in the US, right? There's a lot of pieces that have to be in place.
A lot of
I
barriers.
it's still
Yep.
something I'm getting used to. Like I'm on now so many different Facebook groups with horses and, obviously work with the rescue and so forth, but like I'm still new to the horse world. I saw someone post the other day of like, the horse that they own is not really working out for them as a rider, and they're thinking to sell this horse, and getting people's, inputs on that experience. And for me, even that whole thing of how people buy and sell horses isn't still new to me too, right? Because for
Right.
me, it's like my family animals that I have at home, like they're part of my family, right? And so I don't own a horse, but like I can't even imagine what this person's going through to then be selling a horse
Right.
and go
Right.
through all of that, right? Because, to me, they would be part of the family, right?
But again, because of the expense of them, if somebody's trying to, if it's not the right
They
horse,
admitted, they said they can't afford two horses, right? They
right.
can afford one. And so yeah, that was my point. Exactly right.
Yeah.
Like I feel very fortunate that I can ride. I don't own now. But at least even being riding and taking lessons or doing some of these trips, right? I mean, I feel fortunate to be able to do that. Absolutely.
Yes. And that's what I remind people too. And even when I do writings and stuff, stop worrying about what if why am I not good enough? You're
Yeah.
lucky to be riding,
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah.
and
No,
to have
no,
the
no.
opportunity to do it now in your life, and
This,
in its own way too. I think it might bring a richer and more deeper experience starting later in life in certain ways. There's benefits probably to it as
I've
well.
thought about that. I was thinking, it's one of those things that like we talk about kind of divine timing, right? So, you were saying
Hmm.
talking about divine timing, and for me, the experiences that I've had or the horses that I've been with, it if I had started younger, I may not have met these horses or done these trips that I've done or met the people that I've, been riding with and so forth. And so, you know, I guess it was meant to be, right? The way it worked out. And my life is so much richer for it. And you're right, I do very much appreciate it, right? Even that it came later in life, but this point in my life to be able to do something like that, I do feel very fortunate.
Well, and maybe you even appreciate it more. And on the flip side of it, getting more personal, like not just the writing part of it, but like doing this deep work from the fact starting writing later has put you in these like, oh, am I good enough or am I too old for this and all that stuff to work through all that, and it helps
Right.
all parts of us are
That's true. Yeah. No,
you
that's
know
true. It's helped in many at different parts of my life. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
it's true. And even to try and find a work-life balance, right,
Yep.
as well. It definitely, I think that has, in terms of finding that work-life balance, because I know many of us struggle with it in here in the US.
Oh
Um,
yeah. And I love how you I know when you travel, like sometimes you're in California and stuff, how you found someone out there to ride with too. So
yes.
you found ways to,
Yes.
I'll take a few lessons,
Yeah.
here, and then I learn from somebody else too. And I think
That's
that's
right.
really
Yeah, and
cool
I'm
too.
actually going to LA next week and I'm going to take a lesson with her.
Good, 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 good.
Yeah. No,
You
it's true.
know,
And like even I was in on a trip a few weeks ago and I had one night in between two trips, and so I found a Western pleasure ranch
I saw
in
your post about
Idaho
that. Yes.
and I couldn't ride, so it's okay, but I actually went, and met the horses and really enjoyed my time with the horses. They have such wonderful horses. They'd actually just gotten two Percherons there, and they were just the sweetest horses. And just even that spending that time. So even if I didn't ride, it's fine. But like now I know this place too, and like maybe in the future I can go there and ride.
Right.
So yeah, always trying to find ways to integrate in.
And that's
Absolutely.
why you were doing a work trip.
Yeah, right.
So
Yes.
how does it help you like in your work when you go take the break and go do that?
It comes back to that finding that work-life balance of just stepping away. And I feel it helps me be more productive at work
Yeah.
because it's that, we're in that always that burnout mode.
Mm-hmm.
And being with horses is so therapeutic, right? Like
Right.
I just, just their energy, they're the way they are, right? It just spending that time, like I said, being with those two Percherons, for example, you know, I wasn't working, right? I wasn't on my laptop. I went and just spent that time with them and was breathing and interacting with them. And that kind of took me out of that zone of like, I have to be constantly working, right?
So that when you come back to it, you're
Yes.
actually better at it. I
Yeah.
find even for me, when I get stuck in my trying to write something for a blog, or I'm trying to do this or that, sometimes I just need to go out on a walk
Right.
and come,
Yes.
and my creative juices come,
It's
or
true.
whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's absolutely right. Yes. That's very true. Yeah. No, like I said, that time I spent with these two Percherons and the other horses as well, but especially these two Percherons were just so sweet. Like, the next day I had all this work and like it just all went really well. And, is it again because I took that time kind of, just connecting and then, where this ranch was is just, beautiful, just stunning, right? Landscape, out in nature, kind of being there. And, you're right. I think it helped me, right? Without even realizing
I
necessarily.
I gotta think it's going to help you in your working with others and dealing with people's personalities, and
It's
like just
true.
to be a little more
It's,
like, "Ooh, I got a break from everybody,"
yes. Yeah.
and now I can come
Yeah.
back and
Yeah. It slows
appreciate
you
everything.
down, right? In many
Yes.
ways, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't do things quickly with horses, right?
Right.
I at least from my experience and what I know, like you can't be rushing and quickly doing quickly with horses, right? And so it makes you move at a little slower pace, which I think is really needed, honestly. At least by
Yeah.
me.
And and it might be great that you didn't ride, that you just went and were with them, because you weren't
Right.
like trying to
That's true.
take a lesson or do all that, but you're just there,
Yeah. That's
you know,
true. That's
and
true.
enjoying.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
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 Cool. So tell a little bit too about your trip to Africa and your
So
writing.
Africa, I went to visit a friend, took my daughter there, but as part of that, I found a place where they do riding safaris. And so it was 3 days of riding. It was like can't tell you what it is to be on a horse and ride up so close to a giraffe or a rhino.
Yeah,
I'm an
I can
animal
imagine.
person and I've worked, in conservation, so I spent a lot of time around wildlife. But to be on a horse and come up to be that close to giraffes and Cape buffalo and rhinos is it like there's just not even words to describe it because you're it's like you pinch yourself like is this really happening to me like because people obviously love to do safaris, right? Because it's what's an incredible experience to see these animals, these majestic animals. But if you're actually doing it on a horse, it's like I said, it to me still seems kind of surreal, honestly.
I would think it would make you feel like you're more a part of the herd, so to
Yes.
speak.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're right. That's the way to describe it is you're just there among, you know, and yeah, you're just one of them kind of being there. And so it was really, I definitely want to go back. It was wonderful.
Well, yeah, I'm always inspired by all your travel experiences and your travel history of everything you've you know learned and seen, and your appreciation of all the different cultures and everything too.
Yeah. Well, I spent most of my career traveling all over the world. So
Right.
I definitely feel like, um, to be able to understand and respect that there is so much beauty of the world, but so many, differences, right?
Right.
Each culture has its own quirks and intricacies and everything. And to just try to go with that, right? Rather than kind of impose your own ideas of what it should be like, right?
Well, and there's beauty in that as well, right? And their differences. Eh,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's actually something, that mindset, to bring to riding, right? You talked about riding different horses and different disciplines or different whatever, you just
And
come at it with
no,
that open mind.
it's the open mind. You're right. It's the open mind. Like I've ridden a few different horses in the last few weeks, and I was a little bit like, oh, I'd rather have the same horse, right? But I have to say, with each one, I learned something different with each one, and also to some degree, it also helps with my comfort level, right? Because you just have to adapt to each one
Right.
because they're not the same. And like I said, their gait, some are more forward than others, or one like is so bouncy, and like I was like really bouncing all over the place, and now I feel like, okay, I kind of worked through that, right?
Yep.
But I could have tried to ignore saying, oh, I don't want that horse, but like then saying, okay, I get it, some horses are bouncier than others. Let me figure out what I need to do to adjust in my seat or my kind of approach in the riding with the horse, and adjust to that.
Yeah, and it makes you a better rider. I chuckle because when I taught at the college, for 18 years, and I'd assign horses, they'd rotate, maybe it depended, maybe every 5 weeks or so through the semester, onto different horses. And the kids would laugh. They'd learn to tell me, I hate this horse, the horse they love the most, because they know I would put them on the one, not to just make them miserable or that they were unsafe on, but I
Right.
was like, you guys are here to learn how to ride and also be in business doing this. You need to get on the horses that you don't like riding,
Yeah.
that are hard for you to ride.
Right.
So,
No,
and then
that's
it would
true.
change. So the whole joke would be, oh, I hate him, because they would think, well, if
Yeah.
Lisa thinks I don't really love this horse, she'll let me stay on it. And I'm like, nah, I got you guys figured out.
Yeah,
But
no, no, no,
yeah,
it's true. Well, even like when I was in Mongolia, there was one horse that I fell in love with, Burugui, and I had him for a few days, but then he needed to obviously take a break, right? And so they switched me out, and then it was that horse that I did that canter ride. He was very forward, and it was a different experience, and I really appreciated that experience. So yeah, I think the change is good. Yeah, I
yeah,
do agree. I've kind of learned that, even though I've
yeah.
been kind of one of those people bracing of like, I don't want to be changing. I need to embrace it because it does. I think in the long run, it helps me.
Yes, and and I know you have good instructors and stuff, like that to keep you safe, so that
Right.
they push you out of like change you onto something that you're still safe on, but you got to struggle with a little bit.
Yeah. No,
Um,
exactly. That's
you know,
right. Yeah. No, that's
and
absolutely right.
and I know we've talked about this where the brain actually, that's how you learn, is through struggle. Like
Yes, I
research is,
remember, yes, when we worked
yeah,
together, you were saying how about the brain and how the brain can learn and adjust over time. And yeah, absolutely. It
and it
is, yeah, it
requires
is that.
the research has shown that it requires struggle to do that. Though you have to embrace the struggle. If you're
Yes.
struggling against the struggle, then you're not learning, right? You've got to
No, that's true.
lean into
That's
it and say,
true.
which
That's
is
true.
what you're doing, right? You're
Yeah.
saying,
No, and like I
okay,
said, there have been times where I've braced against it, and I really feel like, I didn't really get as much as I, should have out of the lessons, as opposed to just say, okay, let me try and figure this out. This is something you and I've talked through and worked through, is
yep,
like, let me just be curious and try to figure it out. And
yep,
that curiosity is something I keep more recently coming to, of like, well, let me just be curious. Like, again, I'm not going to the Olympics, right? So, there's no some supreme out there judge who's going to be like, oh, you didn't do it exactly correctly, right? But just be curious of like, this horse is bouncy, right? And then, okay, well, how do I adjust my seat or my posting, or, how do what do I need to adjust, or kind of learn and adapt to the horse's trot, right? That's
yep.
very bouncy. So, and be curious about it. Yeah.
Yeah, curiosity is so important.
Yeah.
And I was thinking as you were talking about, I used to, or I still like struggle against um, understanding that the struggle is okay. That is a struggle in itself, and you're learning through that now, that this struggle of pushing away learning
Yes. Yeah.
is even a
Right.
learning experience, right?
Yeah. No, it is true. Absolutely. Yes.
You
That's
know,
very much true. Yes. Yeah.
as
No.
long as you finally, not you alone, but as long as we finally go, oh, I see the point here now.
Right.
You know,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
If we keep
Exactly.
pushing against it, then no, you can't ever learn.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had one trainer once tell me, this was a few years ago, not every day is going to be a diamond, right?
Exactly.
And that's
Yeah,
something too, like in a lesson of, because I hear this sometimes from riders of like, oh, that was not a great, I didn't have a great lesson and so forth. And, to me, I guess, I've tried to think of it of like, no matter what, it's time in the saddle, right? And so as I have more time in the saddle, this was why the trips in South Africa and Mongolia were great because it gave me so much time in the saddle. Because more time in the saddle, like, helps me get out of my mind a bit and be more curious and just enjoy the riding or be less over analytical about everything. And and just enjoy it.
right. And again, the those days when you think, oh, I didn't have the good lesson, that's really when you're learning.
Yeah, that's probably true. And we don't admit that. Yeah, no, you're
That's
right.
the
Yes.
struggle, right?
Yeah, right.
And
Yeah,
if you keep if it keeps, it's not going to keep going up, 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 up all the time. It's
right,
you're going to get to a point where I've learned and now I'm at another place and now I'm struggling.
right. Yeah.
You
No,
know,
you're right. That's right. That's right. No, you're right. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. And then we think, you even mentioned like I'm not going to go to the Olympics, which is true, and so you're not being judged by someone. And I also use this too. I was like, do you know like BC Madners to riders in clinic, and like they she was a beginner once too.
yeah. Right.
They went through all that too. Like they
Yes.
maybe they have a innate talent or had really good whatever behind them, but
Right.
everybody starts as a beginner. So we all
That's
kind of work through this. We're just at a different place in the the I don't remember how it goes, but we're at a different chapter in the book.
right. Yes. Yeah. No,
You
that's
know,
true. That's very true. Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. And it's
So
a journey, right? In the end, it's really a journey, right? There'll be ups, downs, like a few steps forward, a few steps back. As you said, you learn through that. But it's the journey and just being able to, for me, just to have horses a part of my life, even though I don't have my own horse, but just have horses a part of my life. Like to me, that is just incredible.
and to just be in it right now. Maybe one
Yeah.
day you will have horses, but instead of
Right.
worrying about when am I going to have horses in my like
Yes.
own my, it's let me enjoy what I have right now.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
That day may come. It may not. I don't know. Right.
Yep.
But yes, absolutely. I'm happy where I am, right?
Yep.
With the opportunity to be able to ride at this point in my life and be learning. Because I will say that one of the things too is, obviously, as they say, as we age, right, the mind and the body, changes and it does, right? But it's nice to also be able to, with writing, is challenge your brain. Like to me, I feel
Right.
like every lesson I take, like I'm working my brain because I'm like trying to sort out, like, where my reins are, how I'm using my reins, how I'm using my legs, like everything is my little brain is working there, right? And keeping me agile, right?
Well,
Of
yes,
like,
it's mind body, like
yeah,
balance and all of those things,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And as we age, they recommend that we do things to help us
Yeah.
keep our brains sharp and to keep our bodies, yeah, definitely.
Exactly. Yeah.
Definitely.
And so to me, riding, like there can't be anything better than riding for doing that,
Right.
honestly.
And then you have the horses, the animals as well. So what tips would you give someone entering riding later in life?
Um, I would probably say, if you're considering riding later in life and it's something you want to do, just start, right? Like, for
Yep.
me, I kept pushing it off and off and off and
Waiting for that perfect time.
waiting for that perfect
Yeah.
time. And, there's never a perfect time, honestly. This is just how it is with life. I remember when I
Yep.
was adopting a dog at one point and I'd had my daughter, my baby, and people were like, you just had a baby, why are you going to get a dog? And it's not the right time. And I was like, well, there's never going to be a perfect time, right? Like you
Right.
just go with it, right? And if you don't have the means, obviously, of course, like, it's one of those things. I wouldn't take on an animal if I didn't have the ability to take care and so forth. But I would just say get started, right?
Right.
And explore, right? Because there's so many disciplines to riding. I've done eventing. Well, I don't think eventing is for me,
Right.
necessarily. Um, so, explore just because, I know some people that's what they do is trail riding, right? Or even now, like when I in Mongolia, like endurance riding, right?
Right.
So now I get endurance magazines and read about it, and I'm not just saying I'm going out every weekend doing long rides, but even just the interest in it to learn about it. Um, read a lot too, right? I found over the first few years of my riding, I mean, it hasn't been that many years, but in the first few years, I didn't do so much of that. But now more, I've gotten books about different riding, about dressage, about long distance riding, biomechanics of a horse. I am going to pick up, I just saw this weekend, I was doing a horse healing clinic that I did, a book on anatomy of horses. So I want to get that. So, just be open and explore to learn, the different, ways to ride and about horses, or, maybe if you can volunteer somewhere, right? There are a lot
Right.
of horse rescues who need a lot of help, especially these days, right?
Yes.
And, if you're maybe not in a position, you don't feel ready to ride for whatever reason, physically, financially, whatever it may be, spend some time volunteering at a horse rescue so you can be around horses and then see, like, it maybe you say, okay, I want to start riding, or you may say, I don't, but have that time to be able to be around horses and also develop that comfort level around horses, right? Because they are, they're big,
Big animals.
and
Yeah.
a lot of pounds, and kind of you can learn a lot, obviously volunteering it with rescues as well, that you can then later translate if you start riding, right? In terms of just how to be around horses, how to, take care of horses and so forth. So I would say the other is also, you don't, I mean, obviously don't have to be the absolute, like, you know, running marathons person. I mean, I'm not the most physically fit person, but I have, since riding, started now doing some yoga and exercises and walking to keep being fit, or try to become more fit for riding, because
Yeah.
it's, it's funny because people, like, I've seen, I heard people talk about, like, when they watch, like with the Olympics we had this summer, right? And it, like, oh, it looks so easy what they're doing riding. And now that I've been taking riding lessons, I'm like, oh my God, how do they even do what they do?
Yeah. And
Because it
people say,
must
well,
have,
that's not really exercise.
it
Well,
must, oh my goodness. Oh, well, this is me. I mean, in a lesson, I'm like sweating buckets because I'm working with the horse, using every parts of my body that you're not normally using. You're using your mind. I mean, there's so much to it. So I would say, try to also, bring in things like yoga or other exercising, because I think it'll help with the riding as well, especially if you're starting as an adult rider, right?
yeah, I think the yoga or Pilates and like those stretching ones are really good
Yeah.
too. They're strength and balance, but they're also help you stretch those muscles so you're not so tight.
And open up the hips, because one of the
Yep.
things for me, right, like starting later in life, is like you don't have that open flexible hips.
Yep.
And that, I think, is where those exercises can be really important to do. I mean, like I said, it's a work in progress.
Right. But I agree. I think, yeah, yoga or some things where you're stretching and stuff
Right.
is really good. I like yoga too because it brings, particularly if you do yoga that's true yoga, it brings the mindfulness aspect to it as well. It makes you more, it's something that, you're more present and it just doing the exercises here, and you're not
Yeah.
rushing through them and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're on, now online you can also find programs that are designed for riders, right? With
Yep.
these types of,
They even have yoga on horseback now and
oh,
stuff.
dude, okay.
It's
Yeah.
kind of cool.
Yeah.
But I think it's good to do it, like again, for someone who's maybe not has a horse, doesn't have a horse, or is into is to just do it off the horse and geared towards those parts of the body that help.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know you've brought it up some already, but you did coaching. What brought you to coaching, and what did you feel it how it benefited you?
Well, so for me, it was when I was eventing. And I say eventing, I mean, I was really like, beginner level,
Yep.
eventing, preliminary, kind of level. But I still, I did the dressage and the jumping and the cross country. Um, but for me, the jumping really caused me a lot of anxiety.
Mm.
And I'm not necessarily an anxious person in just general. But so, like, I would have like just like these butterflies in my stomach as I would be driving to the barn about the thought of jumping. And and that's when I can't even remember how I found out about the Mindful Equestrian, and then reached out to see if you could help work with me on the anxiety related to kind of eventing. And it really, like, I mean, you helped me enormously in terms of just working through and just kind of stepping back and, kind of looking at things in pieces. And, as you and I work through kind of chunking things out, right?
Yep.
And to the point where, I could go to the barn and not feel like, oh my goodness, I'm, have all these butterflies in my stomach about the thought about jumping. Right.
Yeah. And again, I know we've also talked already a lot of things like you talked about that talked about in through your coaching and stuff.
Right.
Working with
Yeah, no,
others. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, the other thing too you help me with is also, some just barn dynamics, right? Like,
Right.
there were, some things that happened, I'll just summarize them as barn dynamics, right? And
Yep.
like, I have been around office politics my entire life. Like, I just, some reason in my mind, I didn't think there was the equivalent of that in barns,
It
right?
sure is.
And so you help me with that, right, as well, right? Of
Yep.
like, okay, how do I work through that, right?
Yep.
So it really helped.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks. And it's, and I love working with you and with people like you who are like, have a professional life and getting into the riding, either back into it or, like I said, starting like, from scratch. Um, I just think it's, the professional mindset, you're really driven to want to do well, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
But then it's kind of finding that balance,
Yeah. No, you're
you
right.
know?
Yes. That is very, you've hit the nail there is, because especially for people in like with careers, it's like always like you're very driven, right? Like,
Yep.
in doing your job really well, but also kind of where is your career progressing and so forth. And then I kind of was bringing the same to riding, right? And you know and that's, I think, even with the eventing, it was like, really pushing myself, whereas like, I don't want to push myself to the point that I'm not enjoying riding, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
That is not what I want, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there is that side of it that you are driven enough to really want to work at it,
Yes, that's true.
right?
Yes,
And
that's
you
true.
wanted
But
to work
finding
at
the
it and you
right,
knew think
riding the right mix, right? Of like, you know, of the riding, everything that comes together, exploring, right? What works.
right,
And
right,
that's what I would say with adult riders is like, just explore, right? What works for you and kind of where you land in a way that, yes, you keep pushing your boundaries, but, it's not kind of pushing you to the point of like, you're not enjoying riding, or you're in the mindset of like, oh, I have to keep, winning ribbons, or I've
being
got to,
perfect.
yeah,
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 exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's finding that because, like, I'll say to people, particularly, when think people were perfectionists and stuff, which often professionals have a side of perfectionism because they,
Right.
like I said, they have to do everything really well. Is That's an honorable thing to want to do things really well, but to understand that you make mistakes and it's okay, and that's how you
Yeah.
learn and all of
Yes.
that. So finding that balance. So that's what I love too, is then seeing like working with you is like that. Oh, I can let go of all that. I can,
Right. Yes.
so
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
I can find that balance. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, it's like
great.
another writer I was talking to who was saying that they struggled with their lesson. And I was like, don't be so hard on yourself, right? Like,
Right.
it's okay, right? Don't be just so hard on yourself. And I have to remind myself that as well, too, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's an interesting thing too, is to when you get hard on yourself, think, what would a friend say? So you're a friend
Right.
saying to her, don't be hard
Yeah.
on yourself.
Yes.
What would
Yeah.
a friend say to me?
Yes. Right.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
yeah, yeah. So that's a good thing. Like, well, and you were to remember when you sit your heart on yourself. Okay,
Yeah.
I take my own advice.
Right. Exactly. Take my own advice.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So, is there anything else you want to share?
No, I mean, I really appreciate this opportunity. Like I said, I really appreciated all of our work, with the Mindful Equestrian to help me through, some, we're for me, difficult and challenging times, um, it really helped me. I would just say, for those adult riders, like I said, who are interested, just if you can
Do
go
it.
do it. I mean,
Yep.
it is like I said, if I could spend every day, at least part of a day in a barn, that would be like a dream come true, right? I'm just not in that position where I am right now in my life, but I can't complain. I am there, several times a week
Right.
in the barn. So, but it's just amazing with horses. I mean,
Well,
we're so lucky to have, if you have horses in your lives, and this is why in Mongolia it was like there are horses everywhere. It was like a dream come true, honestly.
yeah, yeah. Well, and the, like you said too, and I like what you said. Like if you can't afford it or physically you can't do it, but you've always wanted to be around, then go be around them. You don't have to
Yeah.
ride them.
No, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. There's so many barns and therapeutic riding centers or rescues that need people to come help. And if you really have a heart that loves horses, just being able to share that with horses or rescues that need the
Yep.
the help and support. And if riding comes at some point, great. But just like I said, being around horses is, like I said, the time I spend grazing is to me so magical,
Yep.
that I just even appreciate that. If
Right. And I think, again, like somebody might either only have an hour a week and maybe not enough to really take but they could stop and learn a little bit
exactly,
on the
exactly,
ground
yes,
and at least, start and then decide and then may decide, man, you know what? I thought I wanted to do this and I don't, or
right,
I really want to do this and now
yeah,
I see that I want to invest in it. So
yeah, and then
yeah,
you figure out how to work that into your
how do you make
life.
it happen?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly, yeah, yeah.
Well, this was great, Karen. Thanks so much for doing this.
Well, thank
I
you.
appreciate it and I appreciate you and
Thank you. And I appreciate all your posts too.
yeah,
Like I'll read your posts and there'll be like a nice reminder of like be curious or things like that you'll
yeah,
bring in. And
yeah.
like I take a step back and be like, okay, how do I work this into my riding experience?
And I actually, and that's why I'm doing this. I want to get on and do more video stuff and things too. It's always like good intentions. Then how long did it take me to get around to doing this? So
Yeah,
I don't remember when I
it's
asked you.
all in good time. It's
It is.
all in
It
good
is
time. Like
exactly
my
right.
starting riding, right? At
It'll
this
happen
point
when
in
it
my
happens.
life, it's
Yep.
all in good time.
Yep.
So,
So
yeah.
this was great. Thank you very much. And looking forward to talking to you again soon.
Okay,
All
thank
right.
you.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.